is who I was, but it's definitely not who I am. Welcome, everybody. Today we have a very special guest. We have Officer Chris Carroll, who, as many know, was the first officer to show up on the scene the night Tupac was shot on the Las Vegas Strip. This man has 20 plus years of experience. He has worked everything from vice to domestic assault, missing persons. I mean, this man has literally seen and been in the worst of situations in Las Vegas history. Everybody welcome Officer Chris Carroll.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm a retired officer now, but thank you. I appreciate it. And I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, so it's good that we finally got hooked up.
Yes, sir. So how long have you been retired?
You know what? It's been 11 years, and just even those words coming out of my mouth, 11 years. It's just I can't believe it. It's been so fast. But you know, I was kind of fortunate in that I started when I was 21 years old. So the way it is here is once you do 25, you can retire regardless of your age. So, you know, 46 years old, and I bugged out, and I'd had my fill. You know, it was a good career, and I don't have any complaints at all. And it was a good police department, but you know, sometimes you just feel you're done. And I kind of had that feeling, you know. So, and I had it, you know, I'm one of these guys. I always had a job all my life doing something, you know, since I was 13 years old. And, you know, like every young kid, especially back then, I mean, they were always just crap jobs, you know, washing dishes, cleaning bars, low man on the totem pole on a construction site, digging holes and hauling bags, and, you know, just all that kind of crap. So, you know, between that and then doing police work for 25 years, when the opportunity came up and I said, let me get this straight, I just don't have to work anymore, count me in. So, you know, so here I am, and time's flying by.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on that.
Yes, sir.
I know what we put you guys through on the streets. And I've never been the person that was ever mad at a police officer for arresting me. That's what a police officer is supposed to do. I was never mad at a judge for sentencing me. That's what a judge is supposed to do. So you got a lot of people, I'm sure, that, oh, he's a cop, you know. Well, the deal is somebody's breaking into your home. Who are you going to call?
Well, you know, that's the thing. It's with being a cop, you know, it's kind of like being a dentist. You know, I don't like my dentist either, but when my tooth hurts and I got to call somebody, it's nice. It's nice to know that they're there. So
yeah, absolutely.
It is what it is. And, you know, you're thrown into these constant adversarial situations, and that's part of the game. You get used to it. And you knew that going in. There's a lot of good times too, and a lot of funny stuff, and it's just an interesting career. And especially in Vegas, I got to do and see a lot of things most people don't normally get to do and see. So, you know, so that was you know, I missed that a little bit, but you know, it's good to be retired.
Yeah, absolutely.
How long had you been a police officer before the Tupac murder happened?
That was I hired on a Vegas Metro in '88, and I was a cop for 2 years in San Diego, '86 to '88. So I've been on for 10 years.
Okay.
So I was a sergeant at that time, and when you're a sergeant, you have a squad of about 12 officers that work for you, and the squad that night was me and, you know, 10, 12 bike cops. And when I say bikes, I'm not talking about motorcycles. I'm talking about bicycles. So we were bike cops on the Strip, and which was always, you know, there's never a shortage of things to do on the Strip. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I've never been there besides flying over it. But other than that, I've never been there. I would like to go there sometime just to check it out. You know what I mean? You know, but
it's changed a lot, you know. It's generally actually pretty safe place. I mean, you can usually walk down the Strip, and people walk down with their families, and generally that's not a problem. You know, things come up. You probably saw recently that we had a guy with going nuts with a knife.
Yeah, I just did a story
maybe 2 weeks ago. Stabbed 8 people and killed 2 of them, and you know, things like that pop up. It's not an everyday experience, but you know, a lot of times when somebody wants to make a statement, they go down to the Strip because they know people are going to pay attention. It's going to get them press.
So things do happen like that. But being an ex-criminal from Las Vegas, grew up in Vegas and did all of my time and all of my crime in Las Vegas. We never went to the Strip. You just
Right.
And that's kind of an off limits place. You're going to get caught up. And we understood that. So it's a safe place. Comparatively.
It is. And, you know, like any city, yeah, there's parts of town you can go at a certain time of night and you know you're asking for it, you know, like anywhere. But basically, it's pretty safe. You know, the Strip is safe. And like you said, I think the actual people in Las Vegas that are out, you know, capering, being criminals, so to speak, you know, whether it be ripping people off or whatever, they're generally not down on the Strip because, like you said, you know, you're going to get caught up. You know, there's cops and cameras everywhere. So, and there's really not cops everywhere, but we try to make it look like it is.
Yes. Right. Cameras have played such a big part in crime here in the last 20 to 25
Absolutely.
years. It's unreal. You know, you could do things that you could never even think about doing now. And now you can't do it because of cameras.
Well, you know, and a lot of people bring this up. Can you imagine if people had cell phone cams when the whole Tupac thing happened? Or if I was wearing a body cam, you know, which is standard now, but they didn't exist in 96.
Yes.
And I mean, it's hard to say what that would have meant. You know, who knows what that looks like. But especially down on the Strip, you know, if there's not already cameras somewhere from one of the hotels, everybody's filming. So
yeah,
everything is going to be on tape somewhere.
So with the night with Tupac, did you get the call for the fight that happened inside between Tupac and when they kind of jumped that guy on their way out?
So that was with Orlando Anderson.
Yes.
I was not at that actual incident, but I was right in the vicinity. And you got to remember at the time, it's just a fight in a hotel. It's nothing.
That's 400
on the scale of things. It's nothing, especially that particular weekend, because that was a Mike Tyson fight night. And whenever Mike had a fight, you know, that was just the Super Bowl of everybody coming down to Vegas, including the whole gang element. You know, the pimp and hoe thing was huge on a Tyson fight night. So the place is just going nuts anyways, and then just a fight, which, you know, there's no shooting or anything. It really wasn't a fight. It was a beating is what it was.
Yeah.
But, you know, they jumped on him and beat him down and, you know, stomping on him and stuff. But that whole thing took less than a minute and everybody's gone. So by the time any police got there, everybody had left anyways.
Yeah. All you have is.
I've heard some people say, so why wasn't there a report taken? I'm like, there's no report to take. It was a fight. It was a fist fight. It's over. Everybody left. It's Saturday night fight night on the Strip. It's gone. There's nothing.
Exactly.
There's not a report in that situation. But there was video, you know, which I'm sure you guys have probably seen of that whole thing going down. But, you know, sure. Tupac and Orlando Anderson hated each other to the point where when Tupac got word that guy was in the hotel, him and his guys, they sought him out. They sought it, you know, they didn't just happen to run into each other in a hotel the size of a small city.
Yeah,
right.
He sought him out, and, you know, they beat him up and they were on their way. But, you know, a dude like that, Orlando Anderson, he's a known shooter, was a gang member. I don't want to say what gang.
Yeah.
I could be wrong of that, but everybody knew he's a shooter and a gang member. And if you're going to jump a dude like that, you better expect some retaliation because it's coming your way. And I think they probably didn't expect it quite that soon.
Yeah, it happened instantly, basically.
Yeah, that night, man.
So, you know, I could never figure out on Tupac's end why he would just be riding around, hanging out the window, you know, doing all that flashy stuff. I guess, you know, it's just,
you know, it's a party atmosphere. And you know, on the Strip, especially then, I think to a lesser degree now, but you've got people just cruising, you know.
That's what we would do.
Just being loud, partying.
Mm-hmm.
Guys are trying to pick up girls. You
Yep.
know, everybody's doing their thing, like literally out on the strip, and you know, it's a big piece of real estate. You know, you're talking, you know, like 4 lanes each direction for maybe 2 miles is really the strip area. So you know, you got a lot of people, and then you got guys and with cars and motorcycles. If you got something really fast, they're trying to showcase that. You know,
Yeah.
so there's a little bit of everything going on for sure.
Absolutely. Suge Knight, he was on parole, right? At the time that this happened?
I don't know if he was on parole. I know that the guy. I mean, Suge Knight has
He
been a.
was on parole.
Oh, he
Okay.
was on
Yeah, sorry.
parole. Okay,
Yes, he was.
so you know that guy has been in trouble since he was old enough to be in trouble. But he'd been arrested for a lot of things, and yeah, he's just a one man mess, and that guy had opportunities in life. You know, he's playing football for
Yeah.
UNLV. He's there, you know, on a college scholarship. You know, the guy's like 6'8", 400 pounds, and back then it wasn't fat. You know, he's kind
Yeah.
of a giant fat dude now, but I mean, he had the opportunity to do a lot of things, and you know, I think if he'd have went just legit with the record business and work on that, probably would have done real well.
I
But he
think he,
just
Yeah.
yeah.
he couldn't keep himself out of trouble. He still
If,
can't.
go
He's
ahead.
looking at a
Sorry.
murder charge now. I
Yeah.
still don't think that's been adjudicated.
I think that he's been convicted on that. He took a
Okay, he
plea
might
deal.
be.
He took
He
a
might, he
plea
might
deal.
be, but I was saying, looking at the facts of the case and the fact that the whole thing is on video, I was like, I don't think he's going to walk away this time. I think he's toast this time. And you know, he's in bad health as well, and you know, he'd been shot before a number of times, seriously shot, like several torso rounds,
Oh,
and you
Yeah,
know,
and I
he's
want to get into the wounds he had here in a few minutes
okay.
during this incident. But yeah.
All right, but I know before the whole Tupac thing, he'd been shot before and probably after. I remember one time he took like multiple hits with a 9mm in the torso, and it's just a miracle
mm.
he survived. But the guy seems to have 9 lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He really
Well,
does.
you know, Tupac, I don't know how many rounds he took when he got shot in New York, but it
Mm.
was a lot too. Uh,
Right.
it was,
I know he
and
was. I know he was conscious when he were taken away in the ambulance for the. We're talking about the New York shooting. I always
yeah,
got to specify because a lot of people mix up the two, or they don't realize that there's been two. But
Yeah.
in the New York shooting, when they were taking him away on the stretcher, he's giving everybody the finger, you know,
Yeah.
as they're pulling him out of there. So I always say, see, it's not just me.
Yep.
hey,
That's
yeah,
that's what he does.
yeah, definitely. I guess he lived by that outlaw code. I don't
Oh,
know.
absolutely. You know, and I kind of, you know, I got to be careful with how I phrase this, but you know, give credit where credit's due. As far as like, was he G to the end? Yeah, man, he was hard all the way to the end. And you know, some of the people said, well, you know, I just wanted to make him look bad. If I wanted to make him look bad, I could have said he cried for his mommy, and you know, and you know, begged for help, and said I'm scared. No, there wasn't. But that's not what happened. You know,
Yeah.
Right.
the guy was hard till the end. And the fact is, I'm not trying to do him wrong or do him right. I'm just relaying what happened, and you
Yeah.
know, people can go from there.
Yeah. I remember when it all happened, and it was just a different, weird feeling because this wasn't like right now, today, this is the norm. Rappers are being shot 2 a week right now. You know, back then, to hear something like this was just,
Well, you know, there was a period in the '90s where it was pretty bad with
mm,
rappers getting shot. It was going on all over the place. Now, most of those guys were like house party, street corner rappers, so no one knew who they were, and it didn't make much news when those guys, or any news for that matter, when those guys got shot. So, you know, things kind of cooled down there for several years, and now it looks like it's, unfortunately, you know, everything's kind of going back up.
Definitely, it's going back up. By I hate to say it, but I predict at least three more by the end of the year. That's just with the rate it's going. Uh, Uh, I got one of my questions for you
Sure.
is, how far away were you from the scene when you got the call?
Mm.
Okay. Let me clear up a couple of things. There was actually no call. What happened was, so when he was on the corner of Koval and Flamingo, meaning Tupac and Suge, and those shots rang out. There were some bike officers that were at that corner, but they were up in a parking structure.
Okay.
So they heard those shots come out, but they're about 5 floors up. So they hear the shots come out. They get on the radio, and just for people who aren't familiar with police radios, when one cop talks, everybody can hear it. What you're
Yeah.
saying,
Right.
all the other
Yeah.
cops can hear it, and dispatch hears it. So he gets on the radio, and they yell shots fired, a whole bunch of shots fired, Koval and Flamingo, and they take off in pursuit of those vehicles, which is a entourage of 5 or 6 vehicles, and they start chasing them. Would be westbound on Flamingo towards the Strip. But yeah, so there was never actually a call. That's how it came out. But when that came out, I was at the MGM, but I was outside already on my bike. So whenever, as the sergeant, you ride alone. And everybody else rides in pairs on
Yeah.
bike team. So I was alone. So I started heading up north towards Flamingo, which is less than a mile. So on a bicycle, it's it's not too hard to get there pretty quick on a bike. So maybe a little over a half mile, half mile, 3/4 of a mile, somewhere in that. I should go back and I should know that exactly, but a half to 3/4 of a mile, which you can cover on a bike pretty quick.
Especially if you're used to riding one like you do.
Yes, and when we're on those bikes, I mean, we're on them all day. You get really good at it because you're on that thing all day.
Yeah.
And so we got to where we can move through traffic pretty quick. And, that's why they started bicycles on the Strip. It's the fastest way to get around, because on a car on the Strip, you're generally going nowhere because there's a car 2 inches in front of you, a car 2 inches back on you, and things aren't moving too fast.
Right.
And,
I had you guys.
Foot is too slow and too far, so bike is kind of the best means of getting around down there. So
I definitely understand that.
I had you guys when I was like maybe 18 or 19 years old. We were cruising the Strip, like you said. That was the thing to do. And I had my music up real loud, and it's 2 a.m. And I had, one of the bike cops pound on my trunk, right? Basically like, hey, pull over.
Turn it down, type of thing.
I just took off. I was gone. Get off the Strip as fast as I can,
Yeah. And you always got to have well, we had a paddy wagon, so you always have to have a car, a vehicle in there of some type available to you, because otherwise people will just take off. Surprisingly, that happens. It's pretty rare. Not very often. Like when you go to pull over a car and you're on a bicycle, people are like, why don't they just take off? And I go, well, it's pretty rare. It doesn't happen. And if they do, then we're immediately on the radio putting out that information, and now they're running for the police. So now they're buying themselves a lot of trouble. So it just
unless they get lucky,
as much as people would think.
Well, no, we got arrested that night.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't work out for you that night.
Didn't work out too well for me, but we got off the Strip. We just didn't get a couple blocks.
Hey,
down the street,
speaking of touching the trunk of a vehicle, let me ask you this about police officers. I've watched several videos, and police when they walk up to a car, why do they touch the trunk?
Well, it's part of the training. When you're walking up on the trunk, and this seems a little bit crazy, but what it is, you're making sure that trunk isn't going to pop open so that somebody can come out and shoot at you.
Oh,
I've heard 30 different explanations, and
I would say if you're pulling over a high risk vehicle in a high risk situation, or there's been some shooting or something like that, I might go after the trunk. But if you're just pulling over somebody from loud music, I don't really feel a need to go that far. But
I know that was a way off topic question, but I'm just curious about that.
That's fine. That's why I'm here.
So the one question, Tupac's people said that they saw him either trying to get into the back or reaching for something in the back seat. Does that?
Keefy D said that
There you go.
Keefy D said that while the shooting was happening, I don't know how many shots were actually fired. But he said at the time Tupac was going for the back seat. So was there a firearm or anything found in the car,
No,
or
we never did find a gun in that car.
okay?
There always exists the possibility that during that, you know, that drive from there to the strip, you know, which is pretty quick drive, uh, maybe a minute or two, that they could have thrown something out of the car, but
Mhm.
nothing was ever found. I would think if one of those guys, Tupac or Suge, was carrying a gun, you tend to carry a gun up front with you.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't see
Ah,
we're going to drive along and we're going to keep a gun in the back seat. It doesn't make a
yeah,
lot.
right. Well, it
A
just
lot of
puzzles
sense.
me why they weren't strapped up. You know, that's Suge Knight and Tupac together. You know where they were at. So
Suge.
that puzzles me.
Suge is the one. Suge,
Yeah,
like
you would think. I mean, I really don't know
It's a
what to say to
puzzling. I
that.
know. Yeah,
Unless they tossed a gun, like I said, which you can't discount. I think it's unlikely, though. I
yeah.
mean, they're running from the police. It's heat of the moment. They've been shot, and it just doesn't seem like the type of situation where you're going to have the presence of mind and the ability to dump a weapon, especially when you're the
Uh,
one shot. Who's shot?
so.
You're not shooting somebody else.
What was Suge doing when you got to the car?
Well, you know, when I got up to the car, and we're talking 5 or 6 cars pulling up, and you got to understand, all I know is there's been a bunch of shots fired. I
Yeah.
don't know who fired at who. No one knows at this point who fired at who, which car's the shooter, what's going on. So when all those cars came to a stop, and you know, as far as the phrase that I arrived on the call, I didn't really arrive there. We literally ran into each other.
Yeah.
They're heading north and I'm heading south. And when they got to the intersection at Harmon, they tried to turn on Harmon and spun out because they're going too fast. And 2 of his tires are flat because he had smashed them against a curb. You've seen the rims, right?
yes, yes.
Right. That's from hauling ass out of there and hitting the curbs. So he's got 2 flat tires. He spins out in the intersection about the same time I like literally come sliding in on a bike. So we run into
Right.
each other, and you know, so I pull out my gun and I'm yelling at everybody. The door's open. Everybody kind of pops out, and I'm yelling at everybody to get out, get down on the ground. You know, just I'm trying to control the situation as best I can, which is not a good situation. As soon as they pulled up, I'm like, I'm outnumbered. I have no idea who the shooter is. I don't know
Yeah,
what.
no idea where any of the shots are coming from or
I have
anything,
no
right?
idea. So it's the type of thing you just lay everybody out till you can get some help and start going from there. And you know, some of those guys laid down and some of them didn't. It was kind of it was a tense situation, you know, and they're kind of looking at each other going, do we listen to this guy? Do we not listen to him? You know, what's going on? So they kind of begrudgingly mostly get down on their knees. And then, you know, Suge gets out and he starts, you know, he's very mobile. He's running around and
Yeah.
he's been shot in the side of the head. Well, what had happened is he got hit and it penetrated his scalp, but not his skull. So
Yeah.
he's literally, blood is flying from his head, but he's acting like there's nothing going on. He doesn't even acknowledge it. He doesn't touch it. He doesn't look at it. He doesn't care. And he's just running around, you know, he's screaming at people and yelling, and the blood's flying out of the side of his head. And he eventually came around, you know, where he got in back of me. So what I did is, I'm looking at the cars and everybody had emptied all of the cars except one guy, which turns out to be Tupac. He's still sitting in the car, and I don't know, it's Tupac, and I'm looking at him going, okay, this must be the guy that's getting ready to shoot at me.
I want to interrupt you real quick. I'm sorry. You had no idea that this guy was Tupac.
Not yet. No idea
right?
at all. We don't know anybody.
Right. It's just the chaos. It's chaos.
It's chaos. So I come up to the car and, you know, I'm thinking, well, if somebody's going to shoot at me, it's going to be this dude in the car because he's got access to weapons. You can't see his hands. You don't know what he's doing. So I'm like, of everybody there, he's the threat. So I went up to the car and I'm yelling at him to open the door, you know, show his hands out, and he's not doing that. So I grab the the door handle with I got my gun in my right. I grabbed the door handle with the left, and I'm trying to pull the door open. I had a hard time getting it open. Well, looking at the pictures later, there's bullet holes like all around that door handle. And I think what happened to this day, I'm pretty sure what happened, those bullets disabled the opening mechanism to some degree. So I'm pulling at it. I'm really having to yank it. And while I'm doing that, I got this guy who's a freaking mountain with legs coming up my backside, and so I turn around and I point the gun at him to get him away from me and tell him to get the hell away from me. And he'd kind of like it when I point the gun at him, he'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He'd kind of back up. He'd go back about 10 feet, but then he'd come right back at it. So this had happened a couple times. So the door popped open, and Tupac was leaning against the inside of the door. He's hurt bad, obviously. So when I opened the door, he kind of spilled out with the door. So I had him in my left hand and just kind of took him down to the pavement with my left hand.
Somewhat slumped.
Laid him down. Yeah, slumped. Okay. So he slumped into the pavement, kind of kicks himself out of the car a little bit, like he wanted to lay down. And so I'm looking at him, and right about then, as Suge Knight was coming up, I look back, and there's another bike cop, and he's got his hand in Suge's chest, and he's pushing him back. And that was the first time I realized I'm not alone. I got some help. But you got to imagine this intersection is huge.
Yeah.
And people all over, cars all over. I mean, it's just a mess. And and there's still traffic that doesn't realize there's a whole situation. They're trying to drive through it, and it's just a mess. And that's when I ended up talking to Tupac, and Suge. They finally kept him away, at least for the time being.
Yeah.
How big had the crowd gathered from the time you got there till up to this point?
Not as big as you might think. I would say there's tens of people, 40, 50 people, but two sides of the street. And, my attention's not really on them so much, but they're definitely there. But this all happened pretty quick too. So the only people really there are the ones who already happen to be standing there, which is, a lot on the Strip on Saturday night, but I'd say tens of people.
Wow.
So, they're there. And you know what? Somebody did have, of course, there's no cell phone cams, as we mentioned, but somebody did have a camera and got some shots just with a regular camera. So there's some shots, there are some shots of that moment or slightly after that moment when there's pictures taken. Now I don't think there's any while Tupac was still there, but eventually people show up and start snapping photos
of the car and stuff like that.
Right. Of the car. Right. And I could see myself walking around and me talking to other cops and stuff like that. And, a lot of those photos have been, some people have taken this investigation to levels. It's just insane, but I get calls. They were like, "Oh, look at here, picture number 6. Why can't we see any blood in this picture? This proves he wasn't." And I'm like, "Look, these aren't crime scene photos. It's just some dude on the sidewalk. Okay, It's nighttime. It's dark out. People are moving. Most of the blood
with the Kodak throwaway camera. Yeah,
I mean, there's just a million factors involved, and people, I think, try to look a little bit too deep sometimes.
Right. So I got to ask the question that everybody wants to hear and know.
Go for it, man.
Okay.
It's not still alive.
We'll get to that. Okay, yeah. No, it wasn't. But so it was back. After you got some backup, right? And it was you and Tupac there, right? You were kind of just were you trying to apply any kind of medical help to him, or were you just trying to comfort him or keep him kind of calm, or anything you could do?
I was trying to talk to him. I knew he was clearly in bad shape. I couldn't tell exactly where he was shot, but it was multiple torso shots, and he's bleeding out of his mouth and his nose. So I know his situation is bad. Now he's still breathing. So some people have asked, well, why wasn't I giving him CPR? Well, the reason is he's still breathing. You don't give a breathing person, start breathing for him. He's not breathing well. he's I don't want to get too graphic, but he's got the blood in the way and everything. He's not breathing well, but
So
wasn't a lot I could do. I later talked to some people at the hospital, and they said basically he could have been shot in the doorway of the hospital, and they probably couldn't have saved him. He was in pretty bad shape.
what kind of look did he have in his eyes? Was it? Did you think he knew he was leaving?
I don't think he did. And I'll tell you why. Because at first, when Suge's yelling at him, and Suge's yelling at him, pack, pack, pack. I guess apparently that was what he used to call him when they were just hanging out as buds.
Yeah.
And Tupac was looking back at him, and he was trying to yell back to him, and he couldn't. He was, he's trying to get to trying to get his breath together, but you could tell he's looking at Suge, and he's just kind of ignoring me, even though I'm basically supporting him with my left arm. I'm trying to ask him who shot him. Most people who've been shot know who did it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get that information from him. I'm like, man, what happened?
That would be admissible in court, correct?
That is admissible. It's called a dying declaration. So, if you are able to say the person, you're able to tell the police what happened or tell them who shot him, it's not considered hearsay. Normally, that type of conversation, one person tells another, that's hearsay. But in a dying declaration, it's not it's an exception to the rule. So I was trying to get that information, and he's just ignoring me like I didn't even exist. And then I saw him just like in a moment, he crossed over from being like the squirming guy who's trying to yell, and he just went like, I can't do it anymore. He just like physically couldn't do it. And it just reminded me, like you see a runner on a marathon, they're hurting, they're trying. And then all of a sudden, bam, they reach that point and they go, nope, I'm out. I can't go anymore. And that was kind of the way that went. And then once he quit trying to yell, he wasn't looking at Suge anymore. Then I looked at him, and now for the first time, he's looking at me, and I'm asking him who shot him. And, he gets his breath together, and I thought, oh man, I'm gonna get some info here. And then he looks at me and he says, "Fuck you," as we know.
Right.
And then right after he said that, I mean, that was kind of his last go around with breathing and stuff. And after he said that, his eyes kind of rolled back, and he goes into unconsciousness. The blood's taking over his mouth and nose at that point. So when the ambulance gets there, the first thing they do is they intubate him, establish an airway with a tube. So I grabbed a guy that worked for me, and he grabbed another cop, and I said, "Hey, ride in the ambulance with these guys." So Suge and Tupac rode in the ambulance together, because you got to remember, Suge's still flying blood out of the side of his head. I mean, he's not in a life or death situation, but he's clearly in a needs medical attention situation. So because a lot of people ask about talking in the ambulance, I'm like, well, first of all, he was unconscious. Second of all, he's intubated. He can't speak. And I didn't expect that he would say anything in the ambulance to the hospital. I mean, his situation during that drive, which is, I don't know exactly how long, but you're talking like 10 minutes to get there, because you got traffic issues bad from the Strip to UMC
on fight night.
Yeah, especially on Mike Tyson. Yeah.
You can have lights and siren. You know what? Lights and siren don't work as well as people think they do.
Yeah.
Once you're in that vehicle with lights and sirens, it doesn't help a lot, especially if you're in strict traffic, tight traffic. And I'm sure we've all been in this situation. You get the lights and sirens behind you, and you're like, I got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
I got a guardrail on my right, a car 2 inches in front of me.
Yeah.
All you can do is sit there. So it's pretty tough. So I think his ride to the hospital was probably at least 10 minutes, and he sure as hell isn't going to improve. His condition's not going to improve in that time. So I think when he got there, when they say they kept him alive, I think a more accurate description is they kept his heart beating. But
yes.
he was, machines and a skilled trauma unit, which we have, will do that. They can keep a heart beating. And that's what he did. It was eventually his mom that had the machine turned off a couple days later. And I've had people tell me, that's BS because everyone knows he got up and left from the hospital like against medical advice. And you know what they're doing? They're mixing up the New York shooting and the Vegas shooting.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what that is. And I'm like, oh, I assure you, he did not get up and walk out of UMC.
Yeah.
That most definitely did not happen. And then I got with those guys and I said, I didn't think it was possible that anybody said anything, but they're like, no. I mean, Suge Knight's running around not running around, but he's in the ambulance being a loud, obnoxious mess. And, like I said, that dude's a handful, and he's a hard guy to control, and he's emotional, obviously. I think, he was getting, he was clearly, and while we were on the street, clearly very concerned about Tupac. He was upset. He was so upset he wouldn't even acknowledge that he's shooting blood out of the side of his head. He didn't even care. He was looking at his dying friend,
And he kept walking up on you when you pointing the gun at
him. He wants to, and I know he just wants to check on him, but I can't have a dude in the middle of a situation like that coming up on my back. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, man, if this guy jumps on my back, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad.
Yeah, I'm a big guy too, and I've had I'm almost 6'4", 394 right now, and every time I've gotten arrested or anything, they're always making sure I stay back. You know what I mean? And I'm the most harmless person in the world. You know what I mean? But
You're one of those guys that takes 3 sets of handcuffs because they can't put their arms.
And they can't even get any shackles around my ankles. You know what I mean? So that kind of puts in my mind to rest the conspiracy that Suge had something to do with his.
Nobody puts themselves in a car to be shot.
I never thought that was the deal.
No,
Plus,
but it is a huge conspiracy.
You don't hire somebody to shoot the guy while he's sitting next to you. And as we can see, you end up getting shot yourself. It's just by the grace of God that round didn't kill him. It's a miracle he survived.
Yeah, you're right. If it got him in the head anywhere, he's lucky he made it.
Oh, so lucky. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's funny because when I hear people say like he caught a little piece of shrapnel, and I'm like, it was more than that. I think he caught a round directly, and just because of the angle and because of his thick head, it didn't go through his skull. And he was, I mean, it was a solid hit. It wasn't just a little piece of frag that cut his head.
So, tell us a little bit about. You're the first one. Obviously, this has made you famous, infamous, depends on who you ask about it.
Yeah.
How has this really affected you? Because I mean, you have people coming from left field saying, oh, this guy, everything from conspiracy. You're the one who put Tupac in a trunk and drove him to Cuba.
That was one of my main questions is how has this affected your life?
Yeah.
Wow. And let me tell you, we could probably, if we had 3 beers, I could probably talk about that all night. But let me.
Too bad we don't.
Let me start from the beginning in saying that I greatly underestimated the magnitude of this story when it first came out. I thought it would be news for about a week, and I thought it would be pretty much restricted to the hip hop community talking about it, and then that would be it. And man, was I wrong about that. But it kind of, at very first, it kind of freaked me out. It was unnerving. I'm not used to having, especially when the story was new. I'm not used to having, I mean, I've talked to a lot of reporters over my career. You talk to them now and then you're on the scene, but all of a sudden, I got 20 of them, blowing up my phone and blowing up my email, and the police departments was nice enough to take messages for people that called, and they're like, hey, we got like 100 messages for you. Here you go. Do with them what you want. It kind of freaked me out at first. And I went, I got a cabin. Maybe I'm a little bit hillbilly in myself too. So I got a cabin I went up there and my thought was I give it 3 days and it will blow over. Now, how naive
Yeah.
was that? I'm like, I'll give it 3 days. No one really knows. I don't have a computer up there. I don't have internet. You know, no one really knows how to get a hold of me up there. So I figured I'd just go 3 days and I'd come back to Vegas and all this would be done. And on the way home, on my cell, I called my buddy and he's like, man, it's bad. He's like, don't look at the internet. And then somebody else called me and they're like, hey man, you're on the cover of the New York Times. Rolling Stone is on this. All of the major networks are leaving me messages and everything. And I was really in a, oh my God, what have I done? Maybe I shouldn't have opened my mouth.
Yeah, that had to have been overwhelming.
It was strange to me. I think over time, as time went on, you start getting a little more and more used to it, and it starts becoming a little more and more regular. And I'll tell you something that helped is the overwhelming majority of the people in the press I talked to were very nice. No one was really out to burn me or, say bad things about, I mean, you can always make up stuff and twist things. And I'm like, everybody was being pretty fair to me. I got to be friends with, matter of fact, he's a British reporter and I'll leave his name out of it, but, he's a well-known reporter and, he kind of has become a friend of mine. I still, socialize with him, to this day, but he told me early on, he's like, you know what, you need a press person to handle all this. You're doing it all yourself. And my thought was, I was like, look, man, this is going away. It will go away soon enough. And that was like 8 years ago or something. Yeah. So like at the anniversary, I had a lot of reporters asking me like, did you think you'd be talking about this 25 years later? And my response is, I didn't think I'd be talking about it 25 days later. But and I had underestimated Tupac's fame. I didn't realize I get calls from all over the world regularly, countries, and this is weird to me, places that don't speak English. Because if I can understand rap being a thing in other countries, but places that don't speak English, I mean, wouldn't it kind of lose something in translation? But I just did just like I'm doing with you guys. I did a show with a guy from Italy last month. Good dude. And he came out to Vegas. We had dinner and, did another interview and everything. And that was good. So, and the door's open for you guys as well. Should you make it out?
Absolutely.
But, definitely.
I've kind of got it used to it now. I learned don't read the comments. You've always heard that, if you write I couldn't help it. I was that guy, especially when it was new. I was like, I got to read the comments. And I'm also the guy where if, 99 people say, oh, good job, glad you were there. You did well. And one person says, you're a piece of shit, blah, 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 blah. Instead of looking at the 99, I look at the one and I was like, well, why does this make me a piece of shit? I don't get it.
That's me.
Understood.
That's me. I'm like, I can't stand it.
With time, I've learned to move on from that. I don't care anymore. I don't read the comments. I quit reading the comments a few years ago. And, now and then somebody that's a kind of a distant friend or something will be like, hey man, did you hear what they said on this, that, the other? And I'm like, dude, I'm over it. I moved on from that long ago.
I was going to say there's a reason that some of this is there's a factor here that this is such a special case to me, right? For one, I was a huge Tupac fan at the time, right? Okay. Right. 2 days before Tupac got shot, my brother committed suicide in front of me. And it's just attached. Because I remember riding down the road after my brother died, and I'm listening to Tupac. It was comforting to me at the time, right? And then I hear on the radio, 17.
Okay, because you know what? There seems to be, and I can understand why that would have a powerful connection for you. What I find with this case is it's all about the age gap. So the people now that are like, say, over 45 tend not to care about it. Of course, there's always exceptions. They tend not to care. And like people over 55, it means virtually nothing to them.
Yeah.
People that are like in their 30s now, in their 30s,
Mhm.
maybe 40, those are the people that are like heavily into it. And,
Yeah.
I got a daughter who just graduated from high school, and I was surprised to learn, they're big into it. Which a lot of these kids weren't even born when this
Yeah.
happened, and now it's just the hugest thing ever to them. And that's a little bit strange to me, but I guess his fame. I think we can safely say he's probably the most famous rapper ever.
I will
I would
definitely
say
say
that,
he is.
yes.
Yes, I will definitely say he's the most famous and probably the best rapper ever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
It's hard. It's hard. I know a lot of it depends on how do you define fame. I mean, obviously, guys
Yeah.
like Snoop Dogg and stuff are as huge as it gets, and uh, they've been that
Well,
way for a long time. But I think he just falls into a different category somehow. And you guys know rap a lot more than I do for sure. I mean, does he? Is that it? I mean, is it because he's kind of in his own league by himself?
I,
look,
I
Tupac was
think
all.
so.
I think Tupac was, like I said, I always seen him as an outlaw, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
And he was about that life. You know what I mean? Apparently, if that was the last words he spoke to, that's definitely a gangster thing to do. If you think
Right.
if you're about to cross over, he's famous for what happened to him, and he's famous for what he did. That's why he is so big. You know what I mean?
Right. And
Same thing as Biggie.
I saw where that there were literally like hundreds of songs that had never been released,
Yeah,
and so clearly the guy was just putting out songs on a daily basis. He had to be to have so many.
I think he had a
Um,
lot wrote from while he was in prison too.
okay,
A lot
yeah,
of time.
obviously time on your hands, but
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, he just seems to be as big as it gets, and I certainly didn't realize it at the time. Because a lot of people ask me, were you just going, "Oh my God, it's Tupac," and I really wasn't. Uh, I knew that there was at the time there was a rapper named Tupac, and during the course of this thing, I figured out that was him. Suge's yelling at him, "Pack, pack, pack,"
yeah,
and you could see the guy was wearing a ton of high end jewelry. He was driving a top end BMW, all tricked out and everything.
yeah,
So, I mean, you can see that he was somebody right away.
exactly.
Uh, but some people that know a lot about this more than I do about, and I don't claim to really know anything about the rap industry, but I'm told he's the man. It's as big as it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um.
absolutely. And that just all added to him putting more songs out means
And another thing
he's
with
still alive, and that
right.
adds to the whole
That helped
conspiracy.
add that he's still alive, and the fact that there were still songs coming out after he died.
Well, the
Um,
musicians are worth more dead than they are alive. Uh.
Absolutely, and I think it made him more famous. I always
Oh,
nothing
absolutely.
nothing against Elvis, but I think if he'd have lived till he was 80, he'd have probably been playing State Line on Tuesday night. Uh, don't mean to get the Elvis fans hot.
I
But
don't know if we got too many of
I
them in
like
here or not.
Elvis. That's the next guy, but and then an early death brings about a certain notoriety for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us, if you work down on the strip, no matter if you're a police officer, a busser in a nightclub, any of that, you kind of get used to famous people are going to be around during big events.
Sure.
So you kind of lose that starstruck, even if you know
Yes.
who, you're just like, oh man, that Tupac, that
I
sucks. But like, it's just another
and we
famous
we meet
person
a
on the
lot
strip.
of in the capacity working as a cop, you meet a lot of famous people, and I've worked like a lot of us on a lot of movie sets and stuff like that, and there's only a couple people for me on this planet that would get me starstruck. I'm generally not a starstruck kind of guy. I'll throw one out there. Paul McCartney. For me, if I met Paul McCartney, I'd probably be like a 14-year-old girl. And, I don't know what I'd say, but we all have those people that we think that of, but the list is pretty short for me. I mean, I don't know. I think you just get used to hanging around them a little bit, and some people care about it more than others. And I was just not one who was, the kind of guy who was into that.
What about? I mean, after now you have to go back to work. You got to act normal. Your life, at home, your job, all this has happened. People are wanting to talk to you. People like us that are like, hey, how do you cope?
You got to remember this story. I couldn't let this story out until I retired. So there had been a lot of years that had passed while I was still working when this story. I mean, obviously everybody knew who was shot. He had been killed, but they didn't know all of these details.
Right.
Now, one thing you can't do in police work is comment on somebody else's case, especially another section's case. Like when I left, I was a sexual assault lieutenant. It would be completely inappropriate, more than inappropriate, for me to comment on a homicide case. It's not my place to do so.
Right.
You can't do it, and you shouldn't be able to do it. And I had to wait till I was retired till I said anything. Another thing I had to wait for was I have to think, is this thing ever going to court? I'm going to mess up. I'm going to tread upon that court case, and that's certainly not good. So by the time, I spoke about it, which I want to say is, I don't even remember the year exactly, but I'd say 2014. I mean, it had been a long time since the shooting before I came out with it, which is another reason I kind of got blindsided by the popularity of the story. I'm like, well, I'm coming out with it, but it's like 16, 18 years old. No one's going to care. Well, I was wrong.
Yeah, but people do care.
So there is that time gap there. So how it affected me at work the next day was very little. I mean, the other guys that were on the scene too, of course, there's eventually several people that show up. They're talking about it a little more, but I think people need to remember too that story is bigger now than it was then. Being all, Vegas cops, we see homicides and shootings and things like that pretty regular.
Yeah.
So this wasn't something that really stood out that much at the time.
Okay. So for high profile and the other, 22 plus years and 364 days, that was not this day.
Right.
Are there any cases that just stick with you? Any like big fish basically from Vegas, or just something that is hard to shake?
There's so much stuff that I almost and this is for anybody who's been a cop here for that long. There's so much stuff you just have to kind of put it in categories. Like what was this, what was that, what was the other, because there's so many things. But I think and a lot of people have said, other cops and stuff, they're like, man, you're a cop for 25 years and you're remembered for one call that ended badly. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of sucks. Yeah. I was like, I could tell a lot of
right.
things that ended successfully, and no one knows or cares about those.
That kind of overshadows it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you.
It happens, but you know what? I'll tell you what though, because we've been going for over an hour. If it's cool with you guys, we'll do. You want to do another show? And
yes,
absolutely. If you don't mind.
Direction.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, there's so much stuff there, and I don't want to burn anybody out. Everybody's, God bless them if they could listen to me for an hour. I'd hate to.
Look, I could listen to you all night long, buddy.
Listen, this is so awesome.
But there's a lot of stuff, and I think it went well, and I think we could do some. Let's do some more. We'll give everybody a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
And I'll take care of my dog who's biting my feet, and you guys can take a break. But so we can agree on that. We'll all three go again.
Oh yeah.
We'll talk and figure out figure out what we want to do. But and I appreciate that you want to look past the Tupac thing again. And,
yeah, that's there's a lot more interesting things that we can get out of this than just that. You know what I mean? You know, everybody wants to hear that. So, you know, that's the
you know, and
that's
it's funny because I'll meet people somewhere, they'll come up to me and they're like, they want me to tell them, it's just, you know, like in a bar or something, they want me to tell them the whole story. And I'm
right.
like, look, it's on YouTube in 40 different places.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, not to be an ass or anything, but I don't really feel like you know, doing it right now while I'm trying to drink my beer. You know,
Right.
that type of thing. So
Yeah.
you know, so I get asked I get asked a lot. You know what the thing is too? I meet a lot of Tupac fans, and I tell you, they treat me very, very well. I've been
Good.
treated nice. I mean, for anybody who who had a problem with me, there's 100 of them that were just great people. And I've made, you know, as far as do I regret telling this story originally? I don't, and the reason is because I've met so many good people, and I have so many friends now that I otherwise wouldn't have met if it hadn't been for this. So it's gone well, and I get along great with the fans and everybody. You know, I know the Tupac is, and I understand this more now, but that it's very important to them.
Oh yeah.
So I try to.
This
I try
is
to keep that in
history,
mind. That's why I
man.
say I'm never rude about it or anything.
Yeah.
So I try to you know, and people get a hold of me, and I'm pretty good about getting back to them, I think. And you know, as long as I don't see, every now and then somebody get a hold of me, and I'll look them up, and they're, you know, real bad with the conspiracies, and
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I just really don't need to go there. But
You know,
so
my goal really here, I was wanting to learn more about you. So what next time?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it's not because I did want to hear the Tupac stuff, right? Directly
sure.
from you, the same
I mean,
stuff everybody else has heard. But I want, like I said, we're kind of interested in your life and how it's been affected, and we'll get to that
Right.
next time and all
Well,
that.
if you look at it, you can say, okay, if you take Tupac and his fame out of that story, it's just another day on
right.
the strip.
And there's
I want to hear about the crazy, you know.
right. And you know, that's the thing. Like I said, this has happened to 100 other guys that no one knows or cares about. Now, I don't get a dying declaration very often. That's
Right.
pretty darn rare. But you know, it does happen every 10 years or so.
This is
Yeah,
awesome.
but
I
we'll
can't thank
stay in
you
touch
enough.
with you. Yeah, you have all my blessings. I do appreciate you getting back to me after your partners was
Yeah.
laid to rest. All that. Just man, it's just been amazing to speak to you. Really, you're a
All right,
legend.
guys. Thanks. It's been great talking to you, and I look forward to the next one.
All right.
Okay, I'll
Thank you
stay
very
in touch.
much.
Okay,
All right.
yeah,
Later,
buddy.
guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.
What do
I
you
like
think?
that. I like him. He is
Hey,
super cool, bro.
is he not a nice guy or what, man?
Super nice guy. I like every bit of talking to him. And you know, it sucks. I'm sure this guy, that's all he hears
Yeah,
is
yeah.
tell me about Tupac. Tell me about Tupac. Tell me about
Yeah.
Tupac. And I know, I mean, there's got to be so many things in 20 some odd years that he has seen. And
Yeah.
you know he's a good dude because he made it to sergeant. He made it to lieutenant. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you don't, Rudy Poos don't go up the ladder like that.
No, man.
This is who I was, but it's definitely not who I am.